Tonight's story begins on the coldest night the Wild West had ever seen, a night when a dying Apache woman collapsed at a stranger's gate, and a lonely cowboy made a choice that would change both their destinies forever. What happened next will shock you, break your heart, and remind you that even in the harshest places, humanity can still survive. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share this story with someone who loves powerful tales, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Let's get started. The wind howled across the frozen plains like a wounded beast searching for shelter, tearing through the silent night with a rage that only winter could understand. Snow drifted over the empty land in thick, merciless waves, burying trails, erasing footprints, and swallowing every sound except its own bitter cry. In the middle of that endless white wilderness stood a lone ranch, dark, quiet, half lost in the storm, where Cowboy lived alone with more memories than hope. On a night like this, no traveler should have been outside, yet fate had other plans. Inside the ranch, Daniel Hayes sat near the dim fire, sharpening the blade of his old hunting knife with slow, steady strokes. The wood crackled softly, offering just enough warmth to keep the cabin alive. Daniel wasn't a man who scared easily, but nights like these brought back ghosts, memories he tried every day to bury deeper. His eyes were tired, his hands scarred, and his heart had long stopped expecting anything good from the world. That was when it happened, an unusual thud against the wooden gate outside. At first, Daniel thought it was the storm playing tricks on him. The wind often slammed stray branches into the fence, sometimes even rolling frozen shrubs across the yard. But the sound came again, softer this time, weaker, as if something fragile had collapsed with the last of its strength. Daniel stood up instantly. Something in that sound felt human, something desperate. Grabbing his jacket and rifle, he pushed the door open and stepped into the brutal cold. The storm stabbed his face with sharp needles of ice. He lifted a hand to shield his eyes and scanned the area. Then he saw her, a small form huddled against the gate, nearly buried by snow. For a second, Daniel's breath stopped, not because he recognized her, but because her body looked too still, too lifeless. He rushed forward, boots sinking deep into the frozen ground, and knelt beside the stranger. Snow clung to her hair like silver threads, her lips were blue, and her clothes were torn as if she had fought her way through hell. When Daniel brushed the snow off her face, his heart hit his ribs. She was a young Apache woman, barely clinging to life, her eyes half open but unfocused. Her hands were shaking violently, her skin ice-cold to the touch, and frost had formed along her lashes. She tried to speak, but only a broken gasp escaped. Daniel didn't waste a second. He slid his arms under her body, shocked by how light she was, like lifting a frozen bird, and carried her to the cabin. The moment the door closed, the warmth hit her, and she let out a weak, involuntary cry. Daniel laid her near the fire, wrapped her in thick blankets, and placed his own coat around her shoulders. Her breathing was shallow, each inhale a struggle between life and death. Daniel pressed his fingers to her wrist, hoping to feel a pulse. It was faint enough to scare a lesser man, but Daniel had seen enough suffering to know when someone still had a chance. He boiled water, brewed herbs, and knelt beside her. Slowly, carefully, he lifted her head and helped her sip the warm liquid. She shivered violently, teeth chattering, body fighting to come back from the edge. For several minutes she couldn't form any words, but her eyes darted around the cabin, confused and afraid. Daniel stayed silent. He knew fear like that, fear born from trauma, fear that doesn't trust mercy when it appears. Finally, she whispered the first words since he found her. "Why did you help me?" Her voice was cracked, barely audible, and full of disbelief. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He placed another log on the fire, watching the flames rise higher. Then he met her eyes and said quietly, "Because you were dying, because no one deserves to freeze alone." She blinked, stunned, as if kindness was a language she no longer recognized. As the night stretched on, warmth slowly returned to her body. Her fingers regained color, her breathing steadied, and exhaustion pulled her into a deep, uneven sleep. Daniel kept checking on her, adjusting the blankets, feeding the fire, boiling more water. He had no idea who she was, where she came from, or what danger might be following her, but none of that mattered. Saving her life was the only thing that mattered tonight. By morning, the storm had calmed, leaving a thick blanket of snow across the plains. Inside the cabin, the Apache woman finally woke with clearer eyes. She tried to sit up but winced at the pain in her ribs and shoulders. Daniel stepped forward and gently held her steady. "Don't push yourself," he said. "You've been through something terrible." She hesitated before nodding. When she could finally speak more clearly, she told him her name, Nayeli. Her voice trembled as she revealed parts of her story. Her tribe had been attacked by raiders, violent men who targeted Apache camps for supplies, horses, and women. Nayeli had fought them, buying her people time to escape, but she was beaten, left unconscious, and abandoned in the mountains. When she woke, the world was burning behind her and freezing ahead of her. She wandered for days without food, shelter, or hope. She used the stars to guide her, following the faint smoke she once saw rising from Daniel's chimney, praying it was a sign. When she reached his gate, she had nothing left, no strength, no tribe, no protection, only her broken, frost-bitten body. She looked down in shame as she whispered, "I had nothing to offer, not even my life." Daniel's jaw tightened. He shook his head gently. "You don't owe me anything. You needed help. That's all that matters." Those words hit her harder than the winter. She stared at him as if he were a ghost, a stranger who didn't fit into the world she knew, a world where mercy was rare and survival had a price. Over the next hours, Nayeli slowly recovered. She drank more warm broth, leaned closer to the fire, and allowed her body to thaw from the brutal cold. Daniel noticed the scars on her arms, the bruises on her legs, and the deep fear that lingered behind her eyes. She wasn't just injured, she was hunted, and Daniel sensed danger wasn't far behind. Every few minutes, she looked toward the window, flinching at every sound of the wind or shifting wood. Daniel finally asked, "What are you afraid of?" Her lips tightened. "They might come for me, the men who hurt my people. If they find me here," she stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Daniel didn't need her to. He understood exactly what she feared. He placed a hand on the table beside him and said quietly, "You're safe here. No one's taking you from this place." The firmness in his voice surprised even Nayeli, but deep inside, Daniel already knew whatever nightmare she escaped wasn't finished yet, and when it returned, he would be standing between her and danger. Because something in her eyes reminded him of the man he used to be before life turned cruel. And that was enough. The day grew quieter, but Nayeli's fear did not. She sat near the window with Daniel's blanket around her shoulders, scanning the distant hills every few minutes, as if expecting shadows to appear. Daniel pretended not to notice, giving her space, but his instincts stayed sharp. He had lived long enough on the frontier to know that danger rarely stayed in the past. It followed its victims like a haunting echo, and Nayeli's silence spoke louder than anything she could say. By late afternoon, the wind shifted. The snow settled softer, the sky lightened, but something in the air felt wrong. Daniel stepped outside to check on the horses, and that's when he saw them, 3 distant riders moving slowly across the ridge. They weren't lost. They weren't travelers. They were searching. Daniel's chest tightened. He didn't need Nayeli to tell him who they were. The raiders had tracked her through the storm. They were circling like vultures, waiting for the right moment to strike. Daniel walked back into the cabin, his boots heavy with ice and worry. Nayeli looked up at him immediately. Her hand gripped the chair as if preparing for impact. "They found me, didn't they?" Daniel nodded once. Her breath trembled. She stood up, shaking her head. "I should go. If I leave now, maybe they won't hurt you." Daniel stepped in front of her, blocking the door. "You're not going anywhere," he said. His tone wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that silenced every protest. Nayeli stared at him, disbelief widening her eyes. "Men don't risk their lives for people like me," she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "I'm not other men." He moved through the cabin with the calm of someone who had faced storms worse than weather. He loaded his rifle, checked his revolver, and secured the windows. Nayeli watched him in stunned silence, unable to understand why a stranger would choose to stand against 3 armed men for her sake. "You don't have to do this," she murmured, voice cracking. Daniel didn't turn around. "Maybe I do. Not for you, because it's the right thing to do." The riders approached slowly, stopping just beyond the gate. Daniel stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, his silhouette framed against the fading light. The leader of the raiders, a cruel-faced man with a scar running from ear to chin, grinned when he saw Daniel. "Evening, Cowboy," the man said. "We're looking for something that belongs to us." Daniel didn't blink. "Nothing here belongs to you." The raider chuckled darkly. "An Apache woman came through this way. Thin, pretty, had a bit of a fight in her. She's ours." Daniel's grip tightened on the rifle. "She's not property. You're not taking her." The raiders exchanged amused looks. The leader spit into the snow. "You gonna die for her?" Daniel didn't answer with words. He answered with a step forward, eyes locked, daring them to try. The air grew heavy, tense enough to snap like a wire. The raiders motioned to their weapons. The leader smirked, "Suit yourself." Before the man could draw, a sharp sound shattered the silence. An arrow flew from the cabin doorway and struck the snow inches from the raider's boot. All three men turned in shock. Nayeli stepped outside with the old bow Daniel had hanging by the fire. She stood beside him, trembling but firm. "I will not be taken again," she said. Daniel didn't look at her, but he positioned himself slightly in front, shielding her with his presence. The leader's smirk faded. He raised his pistol. The moment stretched like a final breath before a storm, then everything exploded at once. Daniel fired first, knocking the gun from the leader's hand. The horses reared, the raiders scrambled. One tried to shoot from behind his saddle, but Daniel hit the rifle barrel, sending the bullet into the snow. Another raider charged forward on foot, knife raised. Nayeli, shaking but brave, drew an arrow and let it fly. It struck the man's shoulder, spinning him backward into the snow. Daniel stepped forward and aimed again. "Leave, now." The raiders hesitated, glaring with hatred and disbelief. The leader cursed under his breath, clutching his wounded hand. "This isn't over, Cowboy." Daniel raised his rifle higher. "It is for today." The men mounted their horses and retreated, disappearing behind the ridge like shadows swallowed by dusk. When they were finally gone, Daniel lowered his rifle. Nayeli's bow slipped from her hands. Her body trembled violently, fear, relief, shock, all crashing at once. Daniel turned to her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now." She shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "You risked everything for me." Daniel breathed slowly, the cold air burning his lungs. "You were alone, afraid, hunted. I've been all those things. No one helped me, that's why I helped you." The words cracked something inside her. She covered her face and cried, quiet, broken sobs she had held inside for too long. Daniel didn't speak. He simply stayed beside her until her breathing calmed. Together, they walked back inside the cabin as the sky turned deep blue and the fire began to glow again. For the first time since arriving, Nayeli felt warmth that wasn't just from flames. It was safety, it was trust, it was hope. Over the next days, she healed stronger. The bruises faded, her voice steadied, and the constant fear in her eyes slowly dissolved. Daniel repaired her moccasins, shared his food, and taught her how to tend the horses. She helped him with chores, mended shirts, and even laughed softly once, something he hadn't heard from anyone in years. Their silent companionship grew naturally, like two wounded spirits learning to breathe again. When the snow finally began to melt and the sun stayed a little longer each day, Nayeli stood outside the cabin and looked at the horizon. She knew her tribe might still be out there, scattered but alive. Daniel stepped beside her. "You miss them," he said gently. She nodded. But then she looked at him with soft gratitude. "You saved me when I had nothing left, not even strength to stand." Daniel met her eyes. "You had your life. That was enough for me to fight for." Her heart swelled with a feeling she never expected to find again. She reached for his hand. "If I find my people, will you come visit someday?" Daniel gave a rare, quiet smile. "If you want me to, I will." She squeezed his hand, tears shining. "I want you to." That day, Nayeli left the ranch to search for her tribe, not as a broken victim, but as a woman reborn from the ice. And Daniel watched her go with a heart he thought would never feel warmth again. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't need to. Their bond was something stronger than distance, forged in fire, storm, and survival. And though their paths separated, both carried each other's strength into the world. Two lives saved on one frozen night when mercy changed everything.